Hello, everyone, and welcome to this video podcast on Jerry and Marge Go Large. I am Ken Moorfield, the owner and operator of the Arts and Faith website. And if you're here, you probably came through a link in One More Film blog, which is my web presence on film. I'm pleased to have joining me today Edward Brown from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And Edward, why don't you introduce yourself and say why you're here?
What's up, Ken? I am here. Excited to be here, by the way, to talk about Jerry and Marge Go Large. I'm currently an undergraduate student at Campbell University as an English major, and technical writing is one of my majors, and film review is hopefully a profession I may pursue. So,
I'll get to some of those cultural messages. Maybe let's take a minute or two and give some general impressions, favorable or not favorable, towards the film. So, do you mind going first? What was your overall impression of Jerry and Marge Go Large?
So my overall impression was Jerry is just a great guy. He's like an exemplary person who like kind of restores your faith in small town America,
Mm-hmm.
withstanding kind of the I don't want to say diabolical, but the very influential positions that corporations have in America.
Mm-hmm.
And like he makes you feel like the small guy matters.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just like it is again really like warmed your heart to see like a good man.
Mm-hmm. So,
Like,
overall trending positive, you would say.
oh my goodness,
And
yeah, it was.
one of the
I think
reasons is because of affinity with the main character or the main characters.
right, and the way that he was just portrayed so heroically, and yeah, just very very positive character.
Okay. I was also positive. I was maybe a little less enthusiastic, but still thumbs up or favorable from me. I was wondering what attitude you felt the film was portraying about uh, employment or work, um, and whether you thought that it was sending a message that work was wrongly sort of looked down upon, that it had a more positive view towards work, a mixed view, or perhaps a more negative view. So what did you feel like what do you feel like the messages that Jerry and Marge Go Large were sending to people about work and how we should think about employment and our jobs?
So right, so there were three things that really stuck out to me. So one, work can be viewed in like a monotonous from a
Mm-hmm.
monotonous perspective, right? So Jerry worked at Kellogg for 42 years, basically just being like a good soldier, like dependable, reliable. Right. At one point, one of his friends says, "It's pretty amazing that you work at one place and not for 42 years and not get
Mm-hmm.
fired." And that to me just like needle home the point that a lot of us are just working to not get fired,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's just monotonous and not terribly fulfilling. And then when he goes to visit the CPA, there's this idea of like work not being sufficient. You mentioned pay the bills,
Mm-hmm.
right? Pay the bills. Some of us work and aren't able to pay the bills, and that doesn't make work fulfilling
Mm-hmm.
because, right? Not only is the work that you're doing, right? He's a travel agent in addition to being a CPA, and he seems to enjoy being the travel agent, but that's not what's paying his bills.
Right.
And then there's Jerry's son. I forget his oldest son, who's the contractor,
Mm-hmm.
who seems to like have like the best of both worlds, where he seems to be able to pay his bills because he has a house and he has a happy family, but he's doing work that seems to be fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his work is more fulfilling is because like there's like a product that helps people at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jerry decides to work, quote unquote, as a gambler and uses his winnings to help people, like the meaning of work changes for him.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the film really underscores that point. by the fact that Jerry doesn't initially decide that. It's at the point where he brings in Marge, and they come back from the road trip to Massachusetts at one point, I think. And they're parked outside, and she's looking at the town, and she sort of gets this vision of imagine being able to help all of these, all of these people. And I think at that moment, it transforms what they're doing from, she earlier calls it an adventure or, a gamble or a risk or something that's inherently selfish. Let's do this for ourselves. Let's exploit this loophole, to something that has a higher purpose. Let's do this to not just make money for ourselves, but better the lives of, the people around us. It's pro-corporation, but there is this very old school, almost traditional, generational attitude towards what is the purpose of the corporation, whether it's to take care of ourselves, or our shareholders, or whether it is to promote the best interests of everyone involved, including the rank and file.
Right. And I think for a lot of people, when you think of corporations in like a traditional sense, you're thinking of guys like Carnegie Mellon, or all the steel magnates who made a ton of money by basically, it wasn't really collusion, but they essentially controlled all the raw materials and all the production, all the distribution, and made a ton of, they provided jobs, but they did so to an end to make a ton of money.
Yeah, well, and I mean, in that sort of model of capitalism, the worker is the employee, or the worker is a utility. He is owed his, or she is owed their wage. They're not viewed as being part of the company. They don't share in the dividends. And I think the guy that's leading the Harvard group, he looks at the other students who are filling out the forms and bringing the money almost as being employees. Your job is to fill out these bubbles so that I don't have to. And your money that you will get, it will be your compensation for doing this work. Whereas Jerry seems to view it as being more of partners, So
at one point,
yeah, go ahead.
At one point, Jerry uses the term dividends, right? He's clear that he's going to use the capital. He's going to reinvest the capital, but he is going to distribute dividends. And I don't want to use the word like magnanimous, but it just seemed like the right thing to do. And the shareholders were totally supportive of it because he was just so like endearing and like transparent about what he was doing.
Well, and that's a great point, because a dividend is something you give to an investor, right? A bonus is something that you give to an employee. So even in that language, it demonstrates that Jerry is thinking about the people that he is working with as being his co-investors and not as, his underlings, or that he's, his employees,
Right. So I remember when you initially came to me with this idea, you wanted to talk about like the Marxist aspect of the movie.
And by that, I mean, I want to be clear. I know you know this, but for people who are listening, I don't just mean whether the film has a Marxist ideology, but the Marxist critical idea of of looking at what are the messages that the entertainment disseminates to the audience about what's good and bad, like whether the film is pro-capitalism or pro-democracy or whatever.
Right. And so I think to that point, right, I think you also talked about how like the idea of false consciousness, where like society really kind of dictates like people's choices and ultimately decides like what happens, like the norms that are the established norms. And I think that the fact that Jerry's scheme winds up having to end, the fact that the Harvard group, their exploitation comes to an end, like suggests that like the big scheme will always win. And like the little scheme over here worked for a while. The little scheme over here worked for a while, but they were never going to beat the big system.
For one brief shining moment, we had Camelot. Yeah, it's a little depressing, although it's probably, it probably lets you enjoy those sort of momentary victories. I This is a tangent here, so I may end up editing it out. Have you ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah, the black and white Christmas movie.
Yeah, the Frank Capra. This reminded me of that movie in this sense. I felt like It's a Wonderful Life. Capra has two competing depictions of business. There is the big bank that's represented by Mr. Potter, and he's predatory. He takes advantage, he rigs the system, he steals the money when he has an opportunity or whatever. And yet the film very rarely is called anti-business because the hero is himself a businessman, George Bailey. George Bailey runs the savings and loan, and it's like, okay, we have business the way it should be done. In that famous scene in It's a Wonderful Life where they make the run on the bank, and George explains to them, okay, I don't have the money. The money's in your house. The money's in his house. This corporation works better, only works if we're all in it for each other and not, just all in it for ourselves. So maybe part of the maybe part of the way I redeem the film from being anti-capitalist is sort of saying, like, we've been smoked into this idea that capitalism is predatory in the Wild West and everyone out for itself. And to say, like, historically, capitalism has worked best in America, not just not just because business is inherently good or capitalism is very good, but because it's been fused with an American sense of civic brotherhood and responsibility and integrity and morals. And we hear less and less about like business ethics or the ethics of, capitalism. More and more people will just say, well, anything goes. The only moral obligation a corporation has is to maximize profits. And it's hard for me to hear that sort of pro-capitalist business argument and not say, there's no way you could look at A Wonderful Life and not say Mr. Potter is the ultimate emblem or symbolism of what capitalism is. There's nothing wrong with what he does. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's doing what the system designs, when in fact, most of us would look at It's a Wonderful Life or Jerry and Marge Go Large and say, to the extent Jerry is the hero or George Bailey is the hero and It's a Wonderful Life, they understand something about capitalism that makes it work for more people or makes it try to work for everyone rather than just trying to find a system that works for me. And I guess that's what I found most refreshing about the film is not like I want a film that's pro-business or anti-business, but a film that sort of says like, it's okay to be pro-business. It's not like businesses are evil. Businesses are just made up of people, and there are evil, nasty, entitled people who make evil, nasty, entitled businesses. But that means there can also be good, warm-hearted, empathetic, responsible, ethical people who can theoretically should be able to mean that warm, empathetic, ethical corporations are also a possibility, and I think in that sense, it makes it easier for me to root for Jerry because it's a more ethical model of corporations than just, pro-business, anti-business,
Right.
I see you nodding. Is that, am I resonating?
So you're striking a chord because in Aristotle's The Republic, he talks about how true friendships are kind of built around mutual endeavors.
Wow.
And Jerry basically gives everyone in Everett the opportunity to engage in a mutual endeavor. And so and if you watch the film, like they all become like better friends
Mm-hmm.
because of the mutual endeavor of GSIS. And at one point, the clerk at the gas station makes Jerry special coffee.
Yeah.
It's like a sign. It's like a sign of endearment.
And business
And
can be a mutual endeavor in that sense.
exactly. And the dichotomy of how the Harvard kid ran it, like at the end, he wants up all alone
Yeah.
because it's not a mutual endeavor. It's him trying to spite his father and basically
And co-opting other people into his endeavor rather than including other people in a mutual endeavor.
Exactly. And so, like the small town friendship, and I go back to that 6 minute mark, which is the most remarkable scene in the movie for me, where he gives the woman the groceries on Goodwill credit. Like, it wasn't about the money. Like, and for Jerry, right? It's never about the money per se, about the community. And just the way they all went at it together. And the town became a corporation. Jerry was the leader of it, but the town was the corporation.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you've talked me into liking it even a little bit more than where I started. Edward, do you have any final comments about the film or anything we've talked about?
So Bryan Cranston, some way, somehow, like plays these like particular like fatherly like leadership roles like perfectly. So Paramount, they did a good job casting.
All right.
And even I forget the actress's name, but
like Annette Bening. Annette Bening played his wife. Yeah.
So those two, like, man, great casting.
Okay, cool. So that's our sort of enthusiastic wandering through or thinking through Jerry and Marge Go Large. It's dropping this week on Paramount Plus. So thanks to Paramount for giving us a sneak peek, and we definitely recommend checking out this film if and when you can. I'm Ken Moorfield for One More Film Blog, and this is Edward Brown, who joined me. If you enjoyed our podcast and would like to hear more, go ahead and click that like button on the YouTube video, and maybe even drop us a comment about movies you'd like to hear Edward and I talk a little bit more about. So thanks, everyone.